Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the steam-filled corridors of the Ottoman palace kitchens, where copper pots boil over, the air hangs heavy with saffron and sumac, and somewhere in the background, a man is screaming about cinnamon ratios. The year might be 1542 or 1711, or maybe a dreamlike blend of both, because in this world, time isn't measured by clocks, but by the turning of the skewers. You are barefoot on polished stone, stepping lightly past sweating cauldrons, giant ladles, and a cook carefully sculpting pistachio paste into the shape of a pomegranate. Of course, none of this makes much sense. You, a modern visitor, trying to survive the heat of a kitchen built to feed not dozens, but thousands, royalty, concubines, soldiers, scribes, and more. The pots are big enough to drown in. The spice cabinets have locks. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not post your location and local time in the comments? It's oddly comforting to know who else is half asleep at 2:43 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in steam. Not mist, not fog, steam. Wet, fragrant, and hot enough to blur the lantern light into golden halos. The world here is curved stone and echoing arches. You're deep inside Topkapi Palace, somewhere between the halva room and the pilaf hall, and someone just brushed past you carrying a tray taller than a human child. Around you are dozens, maybe hundreds of cooks. Most are barefoot, clad in heavy aprons. They move with silent urgency, never bumping, never hesitating, like dancers who've rehearsed this kitchen ballet since childhood. You're in the Matbaya Amire, the imperial kitchen of the Ottoman sultans. This is the largest pre-modern kitchen complex on Earth, and it feels like it. There are 9 massive domed chambers, each devoted to a different category of food. One just for soup, one just for rice, one for sweets, one entirely for drinks, despite the fact that alcohol is banned. Don't worry, we'll get to that. The walls sweat with condensation. The brass lids of pots rattle from boiling contents. The scent is confusing. Honey, roasted lamb, burnt sugar, and fermented garlic all hanging together like gossip in a courtyard. And you're trying to find your bearings without passing out from the heat. You pass a shelf stacked with what looks like paper scrolls, only they aren't scrolls. They're dried sheets of yufka, used for pastry and sometimes armor, not joking. The man beside you is grinding something with a mortar large enough to park a scooter in. It's clove and black pepper. Your sinuses attempt a backflip. Overhead, the chimneys suck the smoke skyward, but not quickly enough to stop your hair from smelling like roasted cumin for days. There's a brief panic when someone drops a tray of candied chestnuts, but the cleanup crew is so fast and so silent, it's like watching ghosts mop up a memory.
You arrive at a window that opens into the spice room, one of the few rooms locked with not just iron bars, but seals and wax stamps. Historians still argue whether this level of security was to prevent theft or to hide the absurdly expensive contents from jealous viziers. A cook beckons you closer. He's making zerde, a royal rice pudding dyed yellow with saffron. He spoons some onto a marble plate, sprinkles it with pomegranate seeds, and sets it on a tray destined for someone very important. You hesitate, and he laughs. "If you touch it," he says, "I have to remake it, and you'll owe me 60 akçe." You nod solemnly. You don't know what an akçe is, but you definitely can't afford 60 of them. There's a bucket labeled rose water. You lean in to sniff and almost fall in. It smells like your grandmother's perfume had a child with a fairy tale. Further down the hall, the halvahane hums with sticky joy. This is the confectionery wing, where men stir giant pans of sesame halva, boil thick jellies, and carve sugar sculptures that rival Renaissance art. A chef is carefully brushing gold dust onto a candied quince, muttering something about the sultan's sweet tooth. One story says a previous sultan once banned pistachio halva because it made him dream of betrayal. A bell rings somewhere, not the kind of bell that signals dinner time, but a warning. The sultan is sending a taster. You flatten yourself against a cool stone column as a man in embroidered robes floats by. He carries a long silver spoon. He samples a bit of every dish headed toward the royal table. A single frown from him can shut down a whole section. A sneeze, and someone might lose a hand. There's a curious tension in the air. Every dish that leaves this kitchen must pass layers of scrutiny, not only for flavor, but for danger. Poisoning is a real and constant fear. Some say a secret group of food chemists known as the Totmak Efendileri worked like culinary spies, testing each dish with chemical rituals now lost to time. You step past a large fire pit where skewers of lamb rotate slowly, dripping fat into a carefully carved channel in the stone. One chef takes a brush of thyme and lemon and sweeps it over the sizzling meat like a painter lost in thought. Another drops a handful of coarse salt from several feet up dramatically. He winks at you. "For luck," he says. At this point, your feet hurt. Your clothes are damp with a mix of sweat and steam, but you can't leave yet, because something else is happening. A line of cooks is forming along a table that stretches from one end of the hall to the other. They are plating dolma, stuffed grape leaves, by the hundreds. Each one must be the exact same size, or the plate is rejected. One guy swears he was banished to the vinegar cellars for serving uneven dolma. You believe him. The room begins to dim as the sun outside dips behind the Bosphorus. The marble tiles glow orange. The oil lamps sputter to life. You wander toward the back wall, where an old chef with eyes like raisins gestures for your help. He's making keshkek, a barley porridge beaten until smooth with massive wooden paddles. He hands you one. You stir. You immediately regret it. The porridge fights back. And yet, something about it is deeply comforting. A fringe scholar once described keshkek as the Ottoman soul in a bowl. Was he being dramatic? Absolutely. Was he wrong? Hard to say. Somewhere near the main hall, a musician starts plucking at a tambour. Soft melodies drift through the kitchen, and the noise softens. One of the junior cooks nods off against a stack of bread baskets. Someone tuts but lets him be. He's been awake since before dawn. The head chef appears. He's a barrel of a man with a mustache that defies gravity. He surveys the room like a general. "Good," he says. "We're only 3 hours behind schedule." You take one last look around. The kitchen never stops, never sleeps, never slows. You've survived your first few hours in the heart of Ottoman culinary chaos. But don't get comfortable. Breakfast service begins in 4 hours. And the Sultan, he hasn't even ordered yet.
You're up before dawn, though time means little inside the Topkapi Palace kitchen. There's no sunlight here, just flickering oil lamps and the constant hiss of steam escaping from somewhere. You're still half asleep, your breath damp from the lingering heat, and already someone is shouting about lentils. The cooks are back at it, and this time you notice them more closely. Not just the pots and pans, but the people. 100, 200, maybe more. All of them working in silent, tireless synchronization.
You thought yesterday's chaos was just a special event. Turns out that was the daily routine. The palace doesn't have one kitchen, it has dozens, and none of them work alone. You quickly realize this place is less a kitchen and more a small city. A city built on fire, salt, and extremely high standards. Most people imagine palaces full of jewels and velvet cushions. Few picture the heart of the empire as a boiling hot room where a teenage boy is gutting eels while a 40-year-old man carefully peels apricots with surgical precision. But here you are. You pass the Helvahane again, where the confectioners hum lullabies as they roll sesame into cubes. Then past the Kilar, the dry goods storage, where men with scrolls and ledgers count every grain of rice and nutmeg pod like it's state treasure. Because it is. This, you now understand, is the domain of the invisible cooks, the ones no history book names, the men who make everything work, but who remain mostly invisible to the outside world. You spot a boy stirring hoshaf, a drink made from boiled dried fruits and sugar water, while standing on a crate to reach the ladle. Another carries a sack of onions nearly his size across the tiled hall. Someone else is sharpening knives that look more like swords. And all of them, boys, men, male teens. That's because this kitchen is staffed almost entirely by men. According to palace tradition, female cooks were largely confined to the harem kitchens, separate, hidden, and even more mysterious. We'll get there, but not yet. For now, you're among the devshirme, the recruits. Many of these boys were taken as children from Balkan villages, part of the Ottoman Empire's infamous system of child levy. They were trained as janissaries if they were lucky, or sent to the palace kitchens if they were unlucky. Though, honestly, both involve getting burned by boiling soup at some point. The chefs are ranked like a military. At the top, the Matbach Emini, the imperial chief of kitchens. Below him, a staggering hierarchy, down to the guy who does nothing but peel garlic, all day, every day, until his fingers smell permanently of sorrow. Historians still argue whether the kitchen functioned more like a guild, a prison, or a university. Some say the training was brutal but fair. Others suggest many of these boys never saw the outside world again. One quirky Ottoman cookbook, more a scribbled notebook really, describes the ideal apprentice as quick with his feet, humble with his tongue, and slow with the salt. A confusing proverb unless you've ever oversalted an imperial stew. Then it makes perfect sense. You're told that only the most trusted cooks are allowed near the Sultan's food. They go through background checks more rigorous than modern security clearance. One cook swears he had to fast for 40 days before being allowed to stir the Sultan's tea. And yes, even the tea has its own department.
You wander through the Sherbet Hana, the beverage division. They make sherbet, sweetened drinks infused with everything from rose petals to tamarind to vinegar. Some are cooling, others warming, and one reportedly makes you dream of birds for a week straight. A man in a deep crimson robe holds out a ladle for you. Tamarind with mint and black pepper, he says. You sip. It's tart, spicy, and inexplicably makes you want to cry about someone you've never met. Outside the beverage wing, a gaggle of junior cooks is huddled around a table. They're whispering urgently. You sneak a glance. On the table is a roasted sheep's head, artfully arranged with lemon slices for eyes. A masterpiece, but the ears are missing. Panic. A supervisor walks by. They freeze. Where are the ears? He asks. Silence. Then, from the back, a very nervous voice says, "The dog took them." There is, in fact, a kitchen dog, a massive, one-eyed beast named Zeytin, who reportedly belongs to nobody and everybody. He wanders the palace grounds freely, is fed leftovers by the janissaries, and once famously peed on the ceremonial couscous. He is both feared and beloved. You give him a wide berth. Everywhere you look, things are happening that shouldn't be humanly possible. A team of cooks is stacking baklava in a pyramid 5 layers tall. Another is carving radishes into delicate swans. A third is roasting 30 chickens on a horizontal spit that takes 4 men to rotate. And none of these dishes are for public display. They are for function, for sustenance, for invisible elegance. What strikes you most is the rhythm of it all. The cooks don't shout unless absolutely necessary. Orders are given with eye contact, subtle gestures, and a few strange whistles that seem more bird call than language. You're told this is deliberate. Sound carries in the palace. The Sultan must never hear chaos from the kitchens. The goal is silence, control, perfection. At one point, you peek into a side room and see a man crying over a pot. Not from sadness, you later find out, but from slicing onions for 2 hours straight. He waves you off. Don't worry, happens to all of us. You don't belong here, not really. You're a guest, a ghost, drifting through a machine older and more complex than most nations. And yet, the cooks seem to accept your presence. Perhaps they're too tired to care. Or maybe, deep down, they understand that someone should remember them. Because these men won't be written about in royal chronicles. No statues, no medals, just fingerprints on copper pans and memories baked into the stone floor. A fringe theory claims that many of the recipes used in this kitchen were never recorded intentionally, to keep them alive only through oral tradition, passed from chef to apprentice. That way, when an empire falls, the secret dies with it. That theory might be romantic nonsense. Or it might explain why no one today can quite replicate the texture of imperial mutanchana. The stew was only as good as the man who stirred it, and he's long gone. You finish your tea. Tamarind still clings to your tongue. The baklava pyramid wobbles in the distance, and the boy with the fruit drink crate has now graduated to slicing cucumbers. You step away from the ovens, grateful for a moment of cooler air. Around you, the invisible cooks carry on, as they always have. Unseen, unheard, but absolutely essential. And tomorrow, they'll do it all again. You wake to the smell of roasting chestnuts and cardamom, and for a split second, you think you're in a coffee shop with an overly ambitious seasonal menu. Then the air hits your face, thick, warm, and utterly foreign. You're still in the palace, still surrounded by clanging ladles, sweating walls, and the ever-watchful eyes of a kitchen staff that seems to operate like clockwork, powered by firewood and fear. Today, you're heading deeper, past the rice halls and stew corridors, beyond the candied fruit annex. You're going into the Has Mutfak, the privileged kitchen, the realm of elite culinary precision reserved solely for the Sultan himself. You probably shouldn't be here. There's no yelling in the Has Mutfak, just quiet intensity. Cooks here don't run, they glide. They don't taste, they measure with their eyes. These are the top chefs of the empire, hand-picked, obsessively trained, and terrified of messing up even a little bit. One wrong move, and you're not just demoted. You might be reassigned to scrub cauldrons in the vinegar cellar until retirement, or death, whichever comes first. The space is smaller than you expect, intimate. No giant fires roaring, no hundreds of bodies rushing around. Just a few masters, a few apprentices, and an entire empire's expectations. You hover near the wall, trying to look as unobtrusive as possible, while a man in blue robes crushes dried rose petals with a mortar carved from a single block of marble. Another slices dates into translucent slivers thinner than a sheet of parchment. Someone passes you a silver tray. You panic and grab it, tilting it just slightly, enough for a few pistachios to roll off. They scatter across the floor like guilty marbles. Everyone turns. You feel the weight of 100-year legacy staring at your clumsy hands. A soft voice says, "Don't worry, it happens." You turn to see the head chef smiling faintly, and you realize he remembers being new. You're here to witness something special. Hunkar Beyendi. The Sultan liked it. A dish so iconic, it was named not for ingredients, but for approval. On the menu tonight, stewed lamb on a creamy bed of smoked eggplant puree. The eggplants have been roasted over open flame, peeled with gloved hands, and mashed through a sieve finer than most modern strainers. The lamb is simmering in tomato, garlic, butter, and a whisper of cinnamon. You're handed a tasting spoon. You hesitate, because if the Sultan liked it, who are you to critique? You taste. It's smoky, buttery, and somehow nostalgic, even though you've never eaten anything like it before. Historians still argue whether Hunkar Beyendi was actually invented by palace chefs or adapted from peasant fare. Some claim it originated from a dish Napoleon's cook made for an Ottoman dignitary visiting France. Others say it was whipped up by accident when a royal eggplant dish got over-roasted and someone panicked and added cheese. Culinary history is often equal parts legend and lunch. What's not disputed is that the Sultan's palate shaped policy. If he liked garlic, garlic prices went up. If he rejected lamb one month, shepherds panicked. Royal taste didn't just dictate menus, it changed markets. And behind every dish like this one were endless trials. In fact, test plates were part of the Hasmutfak ritual. Before a dish reached the Sultan, it was sampled by the chef, his assistant, a designated food taster, and sometimes even a palace astrologer who checked the stars for signs of digestive doom.
You're startled as a new aroma cuts through the air. Orange blossom and vinegar? You follow your nose to another station where chefs are crafting zeytinyali enginar, artichokes in olive oil. They hollow out the artichokes with tiny spoons, fill them with carrots, peas, and dill, and braise the whole thing slowly until the vegetables are soft but still hold their shape. It smells like spring dressed up for court. Not far away, someone is working with gold leaf. You blink. Yes, actual gold. It's being layered over tiny almond pastries shaped like stars. The chef does it with tweezers and the patience of a monk. No fingerprints, no folds, just edible wealth. You think about your last homemade meal, probably toast, and feel personally insulted by this level of extravagance. Another cook is blowing sugar into delicate globes using a technique similar to glass blowing. You ask what it is. "A melon," he says. You nod slowly, realizing it's not just a melon, it's a sugar sculpture of a melon, to serve with slices of actual melon, likely arranged on a melon-shaped platter. It's so extra you can't help but admire it. A boy enters with a scroll, tonight's imperial menu. There's murmuring. Apparently, the Sultan has changed his mind. He now wants a fish dish, raw, with citrus. You see chefs exchanging glances. "Ceviche?" one whispers. "But Ottoman style?" another asks. Suddenly, the race is on. The menu pivots. Fish is fetched, lufer or bluefish, caught that morning in the Bosphorus. Lemons are shaved into translucent slivers. Pomegranate seeds appear from somewhere. Parsley, mint, a sprinkle of sumac. It's assembled on chilled silver plates. You're impressed. This many moving parts,
This many ingredients, this little time, and it still looks like something that belongs in a museum exhibit called Things You'll Never Pull Off at Home. Someone swears in Albanian as a plate tips slightly during transfer. The sauce is saved, barely. There's a lull now. Final dishes are plated. Everything is aligned, measured, wiped, whispered over. A man carries the first tray toward the private passage that leads directly to the Sultan's quarters. No one speaks until he's out of sight. And then, sighs, jokes. A cook throws a cloth over his shoulder and leans on the counter. "If he asks for ice cream," he mutters, "I'm retiring." You laugh. Someone else laughs. Even the head chef allows himself a weary grin. You're offered a spoonful of keshkil, a milk pudding made with ground almonds, thickened with rice flour, and flavored with rosewater. It's soft, delicate, slightly chilled. It tastes like the first day of spring vacation. You immediately want 5 more spoons. In the corner, someone is preparing pickled plums, dark, glossy, soaked in brine and honey. You're told these were once used as palate cleansers between courses. That or tools of punishment for picky princes. No one's sure. You begin to understand that the Has Mutfak isn't about indulgence. It's about precision. It's about controlling the unpredictable. The Sultan may be moody, the stars may be strange, but dinner must be perfect. And even then, sometimes it wasn't. An Ottoman court rumor tells of a sultan who once returned an entire roasted goose because it didn't remind him of his childhood. The chef was devastated. Later, a kitchen poet scribbled on a pantry door, "What feeds the stomach may not warm the soul." That door was repainted the next day. No one likes philosophical cooks. The oil lamps burn low. The fires are dimming. The last tray has left. You step outside the Has Mutfak into the quiet corridor beyond, full from borrowed spoons and humbled by culinary greatness. Somewhere behind you, the cooks are already scrubbing down the counters. Tomorrow, they'll do it all again. You wake up, again, not by choice, but by smell. It's sweet, dark, almost toasted. You blink and shuffle toward the scent like a moth toward flame. The corridors are still warm from the night's cookery, but quieter now. Just a few clinks and soft thuds echoing around the tiled maze. You round a corner, and there it is, the helvahane, again, but this time the candy makers are doing something completely different. Last night it was sesame. Now, they're melting sugar in wide copper pans, turning it that perfect, precarious shade of amber. You watch one chef swirl the molten syrup with a paddle the size of a canoe oar. Another sprinkles in crushed walnuts and a whisper of clove. They're making zezeye, an Ottoman jelly candy made with carrots, nuts, and rosewater. Yes, carrots. Yes, it tastes like magic. You lean closer. The head confectioner is pouring the mix into wooden molds lined with cloth and dusted with starch, smoothing it down with practiced hands. He does it like a priest at an altar. The helvahane is sacred in its own right. This is the palace's house of halva, responsible not just for sweets, but for medicinal pastes, energy confections, syrups, and anything designed to boost strength, mood, or mysterious bodily humors. It's half candy shop, half pharmacy, and very much a live dawn. Ottoman food wasn't just about taste, it was about balance. The humoral theory, imported from Greco-Arabic medicine, ruled the kitchen. Foods were classified as hot, cold, moist, or dry, and meals were designed to rebalance the body's energies. Eat too much lamb, hot and moist, better follow it with quince, cold and dry. Historians still argue whether the sultans truly believed this system, or if the palace chefs just used it as an excuse to serve saffron pudding with every meal. Either way, it shaped everything: menus, seasons, even moods. Today's experiment? a medicinal halva made with almond paste, honey, musk, and crushed ambergris. Yes, the waxy stuff that comes from whale intestines. It was prized for its aroma and considered an aphrodisiac, an antidepressant, and a general please the sultan potion. Fringe theory? Maybe, but someone in the Helvahane insists it once cured a vizier's sadness in under a week. You're handed a taste. It's like marzipan had a love affair with perfume and decided to move into a wellness spa. You're not sure if your mood has lifted, but your eyebrows definitely have. Around the room, syrups simmer gently in small cauldrons. Lemon balm, anise, cinnamon, sour cherry, pomegranate molasses. These aren't just for dessert. They're part of the palace's drink menu. Sherbet, remember? They're bottled and sent out to different wings of the court depending on the day's mood or weather. If it's too humid, out comes tamarind. Too dry, rose with a touch of almond. There's something rhythmic about this place. No one rushes. Everything is done slowly, in long motions. Stir, pour, scrape, dust, repeat. It feels like watching a lullaby being cooked. Someone starts humming under their breath. You recognize the tune. It's an old folk melody from the Balkans, now turned into a kitchen hymn. A copper tray clinks gently beside you. It holds pyramid-shaped candies, dark as garnet, dusted with crushed pistachios. You pop one into your mouth. It melts instantly. Pomegranate and molasses. Sweet, tart, chewy, and gone too soon. Just like half the things you love in life. There's a side table stacked with makun, Ottoman sticky paste sweets, famous for their color and mystery. Each swirl holds multiple flavors: mint, cinnamon, clove, orange peel, sometimes even pepper or lavender. No one really knows what's in each spoonful until it's in your mouth. Kind of like palace politics.
Makun was once street candy, sold by vendors in tall hats with spinning trays, but here it's royal grade. They layer it in jars as gifts. There's even a record of one being sent to a princess as part of a marriage proposal. Historians still debate whether that's romantic or just very sticky. A chef gestures you over to a pan where almonds are roasting with sugar. He tosses the mix expertly until the nuts are glossy, amber, and warm. You ask what it is. He shrugs. Palace trail mix. You nod solemnly. You'd take this over energy bars any day. You glance around. On one shelf sits a block of masir paste, a bizarre mix of 40-plus spices and herbs, supposedly invented by the mother of Suleiman the Magnificent as a cure-all. It tastes like licorice met curry and then fell in love with menthol. People still make it today. Some claim it cures headaches. Others say it just makes you talk faster. A cook leans in and confesses that once a janissary ate an entire spoonful before battle and didn't sleep for 3 days. You're not sure if he's exaggerating. You're also not sure you won't try it later. In the far corner, a group of apprentices is crushing nuts by hand with stone mortars. No metal, just rhythmic pounding. For texture, one says, machines bruise the flavor. You nod like you totally understand what that means. You sit for a while, watching the candy masters work, realizing this kitchen isn't just about indulgence. It's about medicine, memory, and mood. These sweets aren't simply for pleasure. They're tools, messages, tokens, bribes, comforts. You're told that every time a new ambassador visited the palace, they were given a custom sweet platter tailored to their nation's climate and culture. Almond for Spain, rose for Persia, pine resin for Georgia. A chewy form of diplomacy crafted in the Helvahane. Fringe rumor? Some palace gossip suggests a particularly bitter candy was once served to an unwanted suitor from Hungary. It was made with unripe quince, vinegar and dried orange peel. The ambassador reportedly left with a stomachache and never returned. But not all sweets were dramatic. Some were simple comforts, like the soft rice flour cookies called kurabiesi, dusted with powdered sugar so fine it vanished on your fingers. Or the candied orange peels, boiled 3 times to remove bitterness, then soaked in syrup until they glowed like amber. You try one. It tastes like sun-drenched patience, like winter hopes, like someone's grandmother baked forgiveness into a sliver of fruit. Eventually, the room begins to cool. The sugar hardens, the syrups are strained and bottled. The apprentices carry trays back into the maze of corridors. Everything smells of cardamom and rose now. You feel a little dazed, a little warm, like maybe you were cured of something, even if you don't know what. You step out of the helvahane, sticky-fingered and soul-calmed. Back to the corridors, back to the palace maze. The candy stays on your tongue.
The air shifts again, less syrupy, more savory now, with a crisp edge that makes you think of citrus and sea salt. You've wandered toward the outer edge of the palace kitchens, where the warm chaos of fire and frying pans gives way to something more delicate. Fish. Not just any fish, though. Imperial fish. And that's apparently a whole different species altogether. You're in the balikhane, the fish kitchen. But don't picture a bustling seafood shack. Picture a long, tiled corridor, oddly quiet, where apron chefs move like librarians. No shouting, no clatter, just the faint hiss of oil and the soft scrape of knives against glistening scales. You almost trip over a basket of lufer, bluefish from the Bosphorus, silver and slick, eyes like tiny moonstones. Each is measured by hand, and those deemed less than glorious are quietly sent off to the guards' dining hall. Only the best go to the palace table. Here, presentation is just as important as flavor. A single overcooked sardine? An insult to the entire empire. A dull knife cut? Treasonous, probably. The chef in charge is slicing levrek, sea bass, so thin you can read calligraphy through the slices. He's prepping it for a cold citrus dish, marinated in lemon juice, orange zest, and a splash of vinegar, with pink peppercorns crushed between his fingers. It's sort of like Ottoman sashimi, centuries before it would be trendy. Historians still argue whether the Ottomans adopted this raw fish style from Persian cuisine or if it was a local invention, born of impatient sultans and 2 hot summer nights. Either way, it's real, it's fresh, and it looks like something a minimalist food blogger would weep over. Next to him, another cook is preparing stuffed mackerel. But this isn't the kind you've seen at family barbecues. This mackerel is deboned with surgical care, then filled with a mixture of pine nuts, currants, cinnamon, rice, dill, and mint. It's sewn shut with cotton thread, yes, actually sewn. Then steamed, cooled, and sliced into perfect medallions. A dish that requires patience, precision, and nerves of silk. You wonder who even came up with this idea. Some food historian claims it was created for a vizier with terrible teeth who loved fish but couldn't chew bones. Others say it was for a banquet celebrating the conquest of Cyprus, where the Sultan wanted to serve a peaceful fish, one with no sharp edges. In the back of the balikhane, someone is working on fish kofte. Yes, meatballs, but made from finely ground whitefish mixed with herbs, breadcrumbs, and lemon peel. They're shaped into little crescents and baked until golden. You ask to try one. It tastes light and fragrant, like the sea got dressed up for a dinner party. There's a small side room labeled Tuz Odasa, the salt room. You step in and find rows of fish buried in salt, like sleeping royalty. They're being cured for storage or sometimes for ceremonial dishes. In one corner, a junior cook is slicing hamsi, anchovies, paper thin,
then layering them with garlic and oil into a glass jar. The recipe is at least 200 years old. You spot something odd, a whole fish encrusted in dough. You ask. Salt-baked mullet, they say. The fish is wrapped like a gift, baked until the crust is hard as a brick, then cracked open at the table with a mallet. Showy, dramatic, and, let's be honest, kind of fun. There's another dish simmering gently, balik pilavi, fish rice, cooked with saffron, currants, and almonds. It's the type of dish that sounds simple until you realize it has 27 steps, half of which involve soaking, roasting, and mentally praying for balance. You taste a spoonful. It's warm, gentle, sweet and savory at once. It feels like a lullaby on a cold night.
The fish kitchen has a different energy from the others. Less urgency, more restraint. Here, chefs speak softly, move slowly, and treat their ingredients like guests at a royal wedding. You're told that on certain feast days, they would even perfume the fish with rose water or orange blossom before serving. Whether that made it taste better is unclear. Whether it looked fancier? Absolutely. A fringe rumor floats around. Once, an ambassador from Venice requested fish in the Italian style, and the kitchen responded by stuffing a pike with pasta and baking it in wine. No one knows if the Sultan liked it. The chef in charge allegedly disappeared for a week. But fish wasn't just about taste. It was also about symbolism. In Ottoman court culture, fish represented prosperity, fertility, and the mysteries of the sea. Serving a particularly beautiful or rare catch was seen as a nod to divine favor. There are records of sultans commissioning fish paintings for palace walls, not to admire art, but to brag about the size of that one sea bass they once ate. Outside the balakhane, someone is gutting tiny anchovies for frying. You spot a small copper fryer, and beside it a bowl of chickpea flour, black pepper, and sumac. The cook dips the fish in the batter, fries them quickly, and hands you one with a wink. It's crisp, hot, and salty. You could eat 20 and still want more. You ask where they get all the fish. Everywhere, someone says. The palace had its own fishery system, drawing from the Bosphorus, the Marmara, and the Golden Horn. There were even seasonal fish calendars. Spring was for bluefish, autumn for sardines, winter for anchovies, and summer? Summer was when even the Sultan ordered cold dishes, raw or pickled, to battle the heat. You learn that fishermen would race to be the first to deliver the morning's catch to the palace gates. The winner sometimes earned a gold coin. The loser got nothing but a sigh. You also learn that palace records include an official title, Chief Fish Taster, a real job, a terrifying one. His only duty? Eat the fish first. If he's fine after an hour, then dinner can begin. You wonder how long the average chief fish taster lived. You decide not to ask. You head back into the main kitchen corridor now, passing a long table where dried mullet and pickled mackerel are being packed into ceramic jars. These are travel provisions for campaigns, pilgrimages, and long royal hunting trips. Fish that won't spoil even if the Sultan decides to chase deer for a week in the Anatolian highlands. The jars are sealed with wax, wrapped in cloth, and stamped with the palace seal. You wonder if any still exist. Somewhere, buried in a forgotten caravan pack, a 400-year-old sardine may be quietly aging in peace. As you turn to leave, someone hands you a slice of lemon-marinated trout, garnished with fennel and served cold. You take a bite. It's bright, clean, the kind of flavor that makes you want to close your eyes and sigh, which you do. The sea, you realize, was always at the Sultan's table. It came quietly, but with elegance, with grace, with scales polished and bones removed. And as you step back into the hallway, that lemon still lingering on your tongue, you think, this empire didn't just eat, it curated. The sound hits you before the smell this time, sharp, rhythmic, almost percussive. Not knives, not footsteps. It's the clatter of mortar and pestle, dozens of them pounding in strange unison. You follow the noise like a sleepwalker, and the scent follows shortly after. Toasted coriander, crushed cumin, roasted garlic, and something darker, maybe dried limes? Welcome to the Baharat Odasa, the spice room. It isn't a room exactly, more like a cloister of chambers nested within the greater kitchen complex, deliberately kept cool and dry, walls lined with wooden drawers and terracotta jars. You're not sure whether you've walked into a kitchen or a potion workshop. A senior spice master stands at a tall marble counter, grinding cloves into powder with the focus of someone solving a royal mystery. His assistant carefully weighs saffron threads on a tiny brass scale. So few, so delicate, they look like gold eyelashes. And they're almost as valuable. You pause beside a shelf holding labeled jars: sumac, fenugreek, mastic, urfa pepper, cardamom, dried rose petals, black lime, wild thyme, asafoetida. Some labels are faded. Some have symbols instead of words, as if the names alone are too precious to be spoken. The air in here is intoxicating, not heavy or overwhelming, but layered, deep. It clings to your nostrils, your hair, your thoughts. You can taste it just by breathing. The spice master waves you over to his station and opens a clay container of mahleb, a powder made from wild cherry pits. You sniff. It smells like bitter almonds and memory. Good for pastries, he says, and heartbreak. You don't ask him to elaborate. Ottoman cuisine didn't just use spices, it was built on them. They weren't after heat or flash, they wanted depth, balance, harmony. Dishes were constructed like symphonies, and the spice masters were the composers. Historians still argue whether the role of chief spice keeper was purely culinary or part of the palace's health team. Either way, the man had power. A single spoon of the wrong powder and dinner turns into disaster or legend. You're shown a jar of cinnamon bark, imported from Ceylon, wrapped in silk and kept in a cedar box. Cost more than a horse, someone mutters behind you. Seems like an exaggeration until you realize that horse probably wasn't even purebred. In a corner, a trio of apprentices is preparing Baharat blends, house spice mixes unique to the palace. These aren't the bottled Middle Eastern spice blends you see at grocery stores. Each one is tailored to a specific dish. There's a mix for lamb with yogurt, one for rice with almonds, one for stews served only on cold days, and one, the most complex, reserved for the Sultan's personal breakfast porridge. You ask what's in that last one. The apprentice pauses. Cardamom, fennel, dried mint, black pepper, rose petal, cinnamon, ginger, clove, ground almond, a bit of crushed sugar, maybe nutmeg if he was in a good mood. You nod slowly, pretending you can imagine that combination. You can't. Someone offers you a tiny pinch of sumac salt to taste. It hits your tongue like electricity, sour, bright, alive. You instinctively reach for water, and they laugh. We give that to new apprentices, tests their reflexes. A row of spice pastes sits cooling in ceramic bowls. These aren't sauces. They're tuzlamalar, salty, sour flavor bombs meant to be stirred into soups, stews, or even eggs. One is made from crushed olives, dried mint, garlic, and vinegar. Another from preserved lemons and chili. You try the olive one. It tastes like the best part of a winter morning, minus the frostbite. Here, nothing is random. Even the order of grinding matters. Cardamom before clove, pepper after coriander. Never toast sumac, always dry fennel. There are rules, some logical, others bordering on superstition. A cook nearby whispers that if you sneeze while grinding cinnamon, the dish becomes cursed. She's kidding, probably. But spices weren't just for food. They were political tools, medicinal aids, and courtly gestures. A sultan might send a pouch of saffron to a governor as a gift, or as a veiled threat. Use this wisely, meaning make good food, keep morale high, or we'll replace you with someone who understands cumin ratios better. There's an old scroll tucked into a shelf nearby. Its parchment is cracked, but still legible. A spice poem, yes, a literal poem, dedicated to nutmeg, written by a court poet who fell in love with a pastry chef. Apparently, the man baked nutmeg into everything for a month to get her attention. Whether it worked or not is unclear. Whether she ate it or threw it at him, historians still argue. You're invited to help grind a batch of garam baharat, a warming winter blend used in stews and sauces. The pestle is heavier than you expect. It feels like lifting a promise. You press, rotate, press again. The spices begin to release their oils, and the scent that rises is dizzying, sweet, earthy, a little dangerous. You pause to wipe your brow. The apprentice beside you nods approvingly. Good grind, not overconfident. You have no idea what that means, but you're taking it as a compliment. At the far end of the chamber, a senior chef is stirring a pot of zensefili hoshaf, a stewed fruit drink with ginger, cloves, and dried apricots. He ladles a sip into a tiny porcelain cup and hands it to you. The warmth goes straight to your chest. It's like drinking sunlit shadows, like ginger decided to hug your lungs. In a dusty drawer, someone finds a lump of old ambergris. Again, it smells like musk and sea air and honey. A rare, strange substance, a kitchen secret, used sparingly and only when you want a dish to smell like a love letter written on driftwood. Not every spice made it into the food. Some were worn. The janissaries, the elite Ottoman soldiers, sometimes carried pouches of cloves or rose petals, not for flavor, but for luck, or love, or just to smell like something nicer than war. You wonder what spice you'd carry in your pocket. Clove for courage, cinnamon for charm, black pepper, just in case things get too dull. Your fingers still smell like cardamom now. You rub them together absent-mindedly. Around you, the mortar-pounding rhythm has slowed, softened. The bowls are full. The air hangs heavy, rich. The Baharat Orasa has done its work. You step out again, blinking into the brighter hallway, every breath still tinged with cinnamon and lime. The next kitchen awaits, and whatever it's cooking, you know one thing: it wouldn't taste right without this room. You're not even sure what drew you in this time. There's no pounding, no fire, no flashy scents wafting through the hall. Just a subtle warmth, a calmness, a kind of silent invitation. And before you know it, you're standing inside the Helvahane, the palace confectionery. This is where sweet things happen. But not just dessert. That would be too simple, too Western. This isn't about cupcakes or candied almonds. No, in the Helvahane, sweets are philosophy. They're diplomacy, they're medicine, they're magic spells served on silver platters. The space is clean and light-filled, with tiled walls and quiet corners where sugar simmers softly over low fires. It smells like rosewater, toasted sesame, and burnt honey, somewhere between a bakery and a dream. Right away, someone hands you a soft square of lokum, Turkish delight. But this one doesn't taste like the sticky pink bricks you remember from airport gift shops. This one is delicate, meltingly soft, with a whisper of bergamot and crushed pistachio. It tastes like dignity, like the end of a good conversation, like velvet remembered in a dream. In the corner, a sugar master is stirring an enormous copper pot with a paddle as long as your arm. It's filled with pekmez, grape molasses, reduced until it's thick as ink. He adds roasted tahini and begins the slow swirl. What he's making, someone explains, is chezerie, a kind of carrot-based sweet from the southern provinces, studded with walnuts and rolled in coconut. Carrot, Coconut, molasses. It sounds unlikely. You taste it anyway. It's chewy, earthy, haunting, the kind of thing that might follow you into sleep. A row of apprentices is assembling trays of helva, the namesake of the room. Not just one kind, mind you. There's unhelvasi, made from flour and butter, toasted until golden and nutty. There's irmik helvasi, made from semolina and pine nuts. There's even bademezmesi, an almond-based helva so delicate it can be rolled into miniature roses and brushed with silver leaf. You ask how many kinds of helva exist. Someone shrugs. Dozens, maybe hundreds. And every one has its moment. Mourning, helva. Celebration, helva. Recovery from illness, guess what? Helva again. There's even a saying, a life full of helva is a life not wasted. Historians still argue whether helva originally came from Persia, India, or the Abbasid court. Truth is, everyone wants credit, but no one made it quite like the Ottomans. Measured, balanced, tender on the tongue, but never cloying. You're shown a secret shelf where ingredients for Mesir Machunu are stored. You think it's just another jam, until they tell you it contains over 40 spices and herbs, including galangal, turmeric, licorice root, and sometimes opium back in the old days. It was part candy, part cure-all, part love potion, a royal favorite. There's even a festival in Manisa where it's still thrown from balconies like confetti. A little extreme for a sugar rush, but you respect the commitment.
You drift past trays of akide shekere, hard candies that look like stained glass pebbles. These were offered to janissaries when receiving their wages. If the sweets were good, it meant things were stable. If the candies were bitter, well, bad news. One cook hands you a piece of rose akide. You pop it in your mouth. It crunches once, then dissolves like a memory. It's floral, yes, but not in a perfume way, more like walking through a garden after rain. In the far corner, a toffee specialist is stretching kaymaklı şeker, a creamy pull candy that requires exactly 47 folds to achieve the perfect snap. Miss a fold and it's too brittle. Fold too much and it melts. It's a sweet with rules, and it doesn't care if you're tired. You watch her hands move like clockwork, never pausing. Her palms glisten with butter. Her face is calm, almost holy. She probably hasn't burned herself since 1573. There's a whisper of something bitter in the air now. Mastic, maybe? Or quince peel boiling in syrup. You turn and spot a small pan of ayva tatlısı, poached quince, slow-cooked with clove and cinnamon until ruby red. It's served with thick cream, and when you taste it, it's soft but holds its shape, like fruit that's learned patience. And then comes the goulash, a seasonal dish made during Ramadan. Thin sheets of rice paper soaked in milk and rosewater, layered with crushed walnuts, then topped with pomegranate seeds. It's pale, cold, almost ghostly, but it lingers like candlelight, like poetry whispered under breath. There's even a fringe dish here, snow halva. Yes, actual snow, mixed with molasses or fruit syrup, served cold as a summer treat. The palace used to store winter snow in underground pits just to make this happen. You wonder if that was more expensive than the saffron. Someone's pouring sherbet. No, not the ice cream, but the real kind. A drink made from fruits, spices, and flowers, sweetened with honey or sugar. There's pomegranate, lemon balm, cherry, rose, even cucumber. One for every mood, one for every royal guest, and always served in tall crystal glasses with etched designs and twisted silver spoons. You sip a cherry sherbet. It's tart and cool, and suddenly your whole brain is summer. But behind the sweetness, there's something else, a weight. The knowledge that these dishes weren't just sugar and spice, they were performances. They were gifts, offerings,
declarations. A halva for sorrow, a sherbet for seduction, a quince red as dusk for when words fail. A fringe account claims the Sultan once broke off a marriage engagement over bad lokum. Another story says a royal chef was promoted after inventing saffron-stuffed halva in the shape of a blooming rose. True? Who knows? But in this kitchen, it feels plausible. You catch a glimpse of a painted tile near the hearth. It reads, "Let your sugar be your wisdom, your flour your heart." No one explains it. They don't have to. You walk out slowly, sticky with sweetness and wonder. Your fingers smell like rose and almond. Your lips tingle from sherbet. And as the door of the helvahane closes behind you, you realize, no matter how powerful a sultan becomes, he's still human. And humans? They always want dessert.
You're still licking sherbet off your upper lip when you notice the heat again, but not the open flame kind. This is humid, heavy, medicinal. A different heat, the kind that makes your skin glisten and your thoughts slow. You've entered the shurup odasa, the syrup room. Part kitchen, part apothecary, and entirely strange. Inside, the air hums with steam and spice. Copper kettles bubble softly on low fires. Bundles of herbs hang from the rafters like sleeping bats, and someone is slicing what looks like dried fig into thin coins with a blade so sharp it sings. This is where the Ottomans turned plants into potions. Sweet, sour, bitter, soothing. They believed every flavor had a job, every ingredient a purpose. Nothing was just for taste, not here. You're shown a bowl of zenjafil shurubu, ginger syrup, infused with lemon and honey. It's served in a tiny porcelain cup shaped like a tulip. One sip and your sinuses unclog, your heart races, your toes consider doing a little dance. For sore throats, someone says. Sure, and maybe for low moods too. Across the room, another apprentice ladles out demir hindi sherbeti, tamarind syrup. It's tangy, almost metallic, made with cloves, cinnamon, and sugar. You ask if it's meant for guests. The cook laughs. No, for hangovers or heartbreak. You nod. No follow-up needed. Everywhere you turn, there are jars. Not your grandma's jelly jars. These are sealed ceramic crocks with wax lids and cryptic labels. Some contain rose syrup, so fragrant you can smell it across the room. Others hold licorice root, crushed fennel, purple basil, or strange black pebbles labeled sumac salt. There's one with dried apricot kernels, used with caution because too many can turn poetic into poison. A master syrup maker explains that the Ottomans believed in 4 humors: hot, cold, wet, dry. You nod like you understand. You don't. But apparently a syrup could correct imbalance. Too hot? Drink something sour. Too cold? Add cinnamon. Got melancholy? Try quince. Got anger? Maybe pear. Historians still argue whether the syrup kitchen was more culinary or medical in function. But here, the line is blurred. Food was medicine. Medicine was tasty. You wouldn't find bitter pills in the palace, just flavored tonics so delicious they were practically bribery. A fringe document claims one sultan ordered over 300 types of syrups to be prepared each year. Some were simple: mulberry, lemon, mint. Others were practically spell books: pomegranate with myrtle and crushed pearls, violet with clove and saffron, green almond with sugarcane and rose vinegar. You ask who drank these. The answer? Anyone who could afford the sugar.
Sugar. Always sugar. But not just as sweetener, it was also preservation, a way to hold summer in a bottle. You watch a syrup master preparing kaisa shurubu, apricot syrup. He boils dried apricots with orange blossom water and honey until the liquid turns amber. Then he pours it into tall glass flasks sealed with beeswax. Shelf life? Forever, basically. You're offered a spoonful of bal shurubu, honey syrup with thyme and mastic. You sip it and your throat feels like it just got a warm towel hug. Winter tonic, says the cook, also works on grumpy viziers. You smile, half believing him. Some syrups weren't just for drinking. They were mixed into rice dishes, stirred into stews, or poured over stuffed fruits. Imagine roasted quince filled with minced lamb and drizzled with cinnamon pomegranate syrup, or rice pilaf with black currant syrup and toasted almonds. These weren't sauces, they were signatures, a way to say, this dish means something. You move on to the cold shelf, rows of syrups stored in tall, narrow jars. There's one called gul sherbeti, rose syrup. The cook holds it up to the light, and it glows like a pink gem. She says it was used not just in drinks, but in perfume, pastry, and even ink. Imagine writing a love letter that smelled like your dessert. Another bottle is labeled sirken jubin, an ancient blend of vinegar and honey, sometimes with mint or cinnamon, used for indigestion, headaches, or just a really hot day. It tastes strange but kind of addictive, like lemonade that read too much rumi. And then there's sut sherbeti, milk syrup. This one's odd, thick, pale, and sweetened with sugar and orange blossom, almost like a drinkable pudding. It was reserved for special guests and cold nights. A fringe tale says it once saved a sultan from insomnia. You wonder if it might work on you. The room has quieted. The steam now smells like lemon balm and dried apple. Someone is bottling the last batch of korok shurubu, sour grape syrup. Tart, green, and astringent, like a slap on the tongue followed by a gentle apology. A perfect palate cleanser. In the far corner, a single candle burns beside a cracked recipe ledger. The page is stained with syrup and thyme. The script is Ottoman Turkish, elegant, curling. You can only make out a few ingredients: violet, sugar, poppy seeds, maybe a sleeping syrup, or maybe just a romantic nightcap. It hits you suddenly. This place was never just about food. It was alchemical. A room of small transformations, leaf to drink, fruit to memory, spice to feeling. You walk toward the exit, still warm from the ginger and honey. You feel soothed, sweetened even, like some corner of your bloodstream just got polished. And in your mind, a small, sleepy thought. Next time you feel out of balance, forget coffee. Go find a syrup instead. You barely make it 2 steps before the mood shifts again. This next space doesn't steam or bubble, it crackles. A dry, rich, savory scent hits you like a hug from someone who just came back from the market. You're in the kuro baklagil odasa, the dry legumes room. It sounds boring, but give it a moment. You expected sacks of beans, maybe. But this place is artfully chaotic. Earthenware jars are stacked high along the tiled walls. Scoops of lentils, chickpeas, and dried broad beans spill like gemstones across long wooden tables. You spot bulgur, cracked wheat, black-eyed peas, even lentils so tiny they could hide in a thimble. And in the middle of it all, a single steaming pot. Its contents don't look fancy. Just a thick, tan mush speckled with bits of onion and olive oil. You're handed a spoonful without ceremony. Mercimek çorbası, someone says, lentil soup, one of the most humble and ancient Ottoman staples. You blow gently on it, take a bite, and instantly everything slows down. It's earthy, creamy, softly spiced, the kind of flavor that doesn't show off, but just stays, cozy, anchored, like a pause button for your whole body. It turns out dry legumes weren't just pantry fillers. They were essential. These humble ingredients powered armies, fed pilgrims, and filled palace stomachs when the hunt was sparse. Chickpeas in stews, lentils in soups, bulgur in pilafs. Peasant food? Maybe, but also genius food. You watch a cook preparing nohut yani, a chickpea stew simmered with lamb, onion, tomato paste, and a whisper of cinnamon. The trick, he says, is the soaking. Not just overnight, sometimes 2 days, with a change of water halfway. The beans must breathe. You nod like you do this all the time. Next to him, another dish, bulgur pilaf with eggplant and mint, the grains fluffy and golden, flecked with caramelized onions. This one's vegetarian, but no less rich. A fringe fact? Some say the palace kitchens kept detailed legume rotation schedules, ensuring no ingredient was repeated more than once every 10 days. Not for snobbery, for balance. The Ottomans believed in rotating flavors the way one rotates crops. Historians still argue whether the prominence of legumes in palace cuisine reflected Ottoman frugality, spiritual values, or just seasonal necessity. Probably all three. After all, even the Sultan fasted during Ramadan. Even he craved lentil soup at sundown.
There's a giant pot of keshkek bubbling in the corner. At first, it looks like nothing special, just a beige porridge. But it's made from slow braised wheat and shredded meat beaten together with a wooden mallet until silky. Keshkek wasn't just food, it was ceremonial. Served at weddings, circumcisions, and festivals. There are entire folk songs about it. You taste it, and it's comforting in a way that feels generational. A young cook is stirring a pot of fasulye pilaki, white beans stewed with olive oil, garlic, carrots, and parsley. It's served cold, almost like a salad. Refreshing, simple, endlessly craveable. She tells you it was often part of the palace's zeytinyalu, olive oil-based vegetarian menus, usually served during Lent or on meatless Fridays. Religion meets digestion, you suppose. In a far corner, you find mujver, zucchini fritters with chickpea flour and dill. Crisp on the outside, fluffy inside, a tiny miracle of texture. You bite one and suddenly imagine sitting in the shade of a fig tree, full and sun-drowsy. Someone hands you a dried fava bean, just the bean. We roast them with salt, he says, better than pistachios. You nod skeptically, but sure enough, they're crunchy, savory, addictive. A perfect snack for writing love poems or plotting imperial tax reforms. And the bulgur, oh, the bulgur, it's everywhere. Coarse bulgur for pilaf, fine bulgur for tabbouleh, toasted bulgur for stuffing grape leaves. One fringe theory claims the palace had over 22 unique bulgur-based recipes in rotation. You believe it. Each one feels like a chapter from a cookbook written by someone who respected simplicity. You peek into a pantry labeled Bakliyat Makhzeni, the legume vault. Inside, long wooden bins filled with beans in every hue. Labels etched in Ottoman script, some yellowed and faded, black lentil, summer reserve, chickpea, Syrian variety, wheatberry, spring 1578. There's an almost reverent silence in here, a dry hum of history. Someone points out the ayrik otlu mercimek, a lentil dish flavored with couch grass, a wild herb thought to aid digestion. Not everyone liked it. Tastes like field, one cook mutters, but it had its fans. There was even a sultan who insisted on eating it once a week for clarity of thought. Still debated. Some say he just liked weird lentils. By now, your stomach is warm, not overstuffed, just grounded. You sip a cup of yogurt ayran, salted and cold, the perfect counterpart to the grains and pulses. It cleanses the palate and somehow also your brain. As you sit on a small wooden stool, surrounded by sacks of peas and wheat berries and dusty little marvels, it occurs to you that this part of the palace was the least flashy and maybe the most human. No gold, no fireworks, no sugar towers, just beans and patience and pots simmered without rush. You stand to leave, and the cook stops you. He hands you a small linen pouch tied with thread. Inside are 5 dried chickpeas. For luck, he says, smiling, or soup. You put them in your pocket. Either way, it's a gift.
You step out from the warmth of beans and broths and into a colder, quieter hall. The walls here are marble, slick and serious, and the echo of your footsteps is the only sound until a sudden, sharp clack. A heavy door creaks open. And now you are in the Et Odessa, the meat room. No, not a butcher's crypt of horror. This is the refined side of flesh. Ottoman palace meat cookery wasn't about blood and bone. It was about balance, structure, hierarchy. You see rows of marble counters, lined with wooden blocks and brass tools, polished like they belong to a surgeon, not a chef. You sniff the air. Clove? Lamb fat? Smoked yogurt? It's hard to pin down, but undeniably delicious. The master cook, bare arms, big mustache, tiny knife, motions you over. He's filleting a piece of kuzubudu, leg of lamb. With surgical care, he slices it so thin it nearly disappears into the air. This will become kavurma, he tells you. Slow-rendered lamb confit, tapped in its own fat, stored in ceramic pots for weeks. For long campaigns, he adds, or long winters. You raise an eyebrow, he grins, or just because it's tasty. You move along the counter and stop at a tray of skewers, shish kebab, marinated cubes of beef threaded between slices of eggplant and tomato. They're grilled over charcoal until smoke kisses the edges, and the fat drips onto hot coals with a hiss that makes everyone go quiet for a second. You bite into one. The meat is so tender it doesn't chew, it yields. Charred edges, spiced center, and a little touch of sumac for brightness. You've had kebab before, but not like this. This feels royal. Nearby, an apprentice prepares chikufta, raw minced meat kneaded with bulgur, red pepper paste, garlic, and a touch of pomegranate molasses. No fire, you ask? He smirks. Just strong hands. A fringe theory claims Ottoman wrestlers used this dish to build strength before matches. Protein, carbs, spice, all in one chewy, crimson bite. Historians still argue whether chikufta was palace fare or rural tradition elevated by nostalgia. But one thing's certain, this version is rich, spicy, and oddly addictive. Then there's islim kebabi. You watch as thin slices of fried eggplant are wrapped around spiced meatballs like tiny turbans, then baked in tomato sauce and skewered with a single clove or a sliver of pepper. It's theatrical, regal. You get the sense these dishes were made as much for visual effect as flavor. A side table holds an array of offal dishes, and you hesitate, but curiosity wins. There's kokorech, grilled lamb intestines, seasoned and crispy. There's jier tava, fried liver with sumac and onions. You try one bite, and it's more aromatic than aggressive. Surprisingly good. Even the Sultan ate organ meats, though he had them fragranced with rose vinegar and anise, according to one overly detailed court record. Further in, you find a man basting a whole roasted goose, its skin lacquered to a deep bronze. "Special winter banquet," he mutters, stuffed with rice, chestnuts, and dried sour cherries. That's not dinner, that's a novel. In the corner, a tall iron cauldron is bubbling with something dark and fragrant. Tas kebabi, someone tells you, a stew of beef and vegetables, slow cooked in its own juices with a whisper of cinnamon and garlic. A favorite of traveling dignitaries. Portable, generous, and reliably satisfying. You sip it? It's like being hugged by someone who smells like nutmeg. You pass a narrow door, and suddenly you're in a chamber with racks of drying meats. Strips of beef cured with salt and spices, known as pasturma, Ottoman pastrami, wrapped in a crust of garlic, fenugreek, and paprika, then hung to dry. The smell is intense, like spice, smoke, and defiance. A fringe anecdote? One 16th century vizier reportedly banned pasturma from his quarters because it interfered with the musky perfumes of court. He was promptly ignored. Meat will always have its place. Then there's the mystery dish. You find a tray of mutanchana, a stew of lamb, dried fruits, almonds, and honey, cooked until sweet and savory fuse like two instruments in the same chord. You try a spoonful. Your tongue gets confused, then grateful. It tastes like the kind of meal you'd eat before composing poetry by candlelight. Historians still debate the Byzantine influence in Ottoman meat dishes. Some claim recipes like mutanchana were inherited from Christian courts and adapted with Islamic dietary rules. Others argue they're uniquely Ottoman, multicultural from the start. Truth? Likely both. The Ottomans borrowed, adapted, and made everything theirs. You pause to admire a tray of meat-filled pastries, like tiny golden crescents stuffed with minced lamb, pine nuts, and spices. They're not quite budek, not quite dumpling, just flaky, savory magic. Someone brings a dish of sutlukuzu, milk-braised lamb, so tender it slumps in the spoon. A springtime dish, the chef whispers, for gentle moods. You get it. It tastes like velvet and nostalgia. At the very end of the room, a final dish awaits, tavuk gosu. You expect more meat, but this looks like dessert. A milky pudding dusted with cinnamon. Wait, chicken? Yes, it's chicken breast pudding. Boiled, shredded, and folded into milk, sugar, and rice flour until smooth. A dessert that contains meat but doesn't taste like it. It's a favorite of the palace elite, a literal joke on the tongue. And somehow, it works. You walk slowly back toward the archway, your head spinning a little from the richness. So many meats, some roasted, some raw, some disguised as desserts. But none of it felt gratuitous. It all had a purpose, a place. The meat room wasn't indulgent, it was ritual, a careful architecture of power, protein, and presentation. As you leave, the cook calls out one last time. Don't forget, he says, the best meat is the one shared. You nod, your belly full, and your pocket still holding those lucky chickpeas.
You move from meat to something softer, richer, trickier. Because now you're entering the Tatla Odasa, the room of sweets. It doesn't look like a room, it looks like a dream. The light is golden and slightly sticky, like it's been sweetened by steam. The air carries scents of rosewater, pistachio, browned butter, and a low, velvety note of something floral you can't place. Maybe orange blossom? Maybe magic? Right away, you hear a sizzling tray being pulled from a copper oven. A giant rectangle of baklava, but not the kind you know. This one's thicker, glossier, stacked with 84 paper-thin layers of dough, each brushed with clarified butter so delicate it practically whispers. The head chef, his robes dusted with sugar, cuts the tray into diamonds with a blade that looks ceremonial. He spoons over warm syrup scented with mastic and lemon peel, and each piece drinks it in like a parched guest at a wedding. You try one. The crunch is audible, but not aggressive. It shatters like golden glass. Inside, ground pistachio, cinnamon, maybe a touch of cardamom. You chew slowly. There's no rush in this room. Because in the Ottoman palace, sweets weren't an afterthought. They were status, science, and spirituality rolled into one.
A proper dessert was a signal of power, of abundance, of refined taste. And it had to balance. Too sweet was vulgar, too subtle, forgettable. Next comes goulash, a dessert made with thin sheets of starch pastry soaked in rosewater milk, layered with crushed nuts and pomegranate seeds. Light, cool, and milky, it was traditionally served during Ramadan. Legend says it was created by accident, when sheets of dough stuck together during a festival and someone poured milk over them to salvage the dish. Historians still argue whether goulash originated from nomadic Turkic tribes or from Persian rice pudding traditions. Either way, it's a silky, floral dream. A cook ladles out zerde, a vivid yellow rice pudding made with saffron, rosewater, and pine nuts. The color alone feels royal. It glows in the dish like candlelight. You spoon it in. The sweetness is mellow, more fragrance than sugar, and the grains are tender but distinct. In a corner, you find trays of lokum, Turkish delight, but not the chewy, oversweet cubes you once got in a holiday gift box. These are delicate, dusted with powdered sugar, flavored with bergamot, pomegranate, mint, and something spicy, maybe black pepper? A fringe fact, the palace kitchens had entire sherbet masters, specialists whose sole job was to oversee flavored syrups and soft confections. They were prized like perfume makers, blending fruit juices, sugar, herbs, and spices into drinks and gels that soothed, healed, or sometimes seduced.
One tray holds helva, but not the crumbly sesame kind. This is unhelvasi, a hot, soft flour halva made with semolina or wheat flour, browned in butter and sweetened with honey. It's served at funerals, weddings, and births, all the big thresholds of life. It sticks to your teeth a little, in a good way. And just behind that, kazan dibi, literally bottom of the cauldron, a caramelized milk pudding with a burnt top that tastes like flan's mischievous older cousin. You scrape your spoon along the browned edge and taste smoke, cream, and childhood rebellion. Someone offers you a quince dessert, ayva tatlisi, baked quince halves poached in sugar syrup until ruby red, then filled with clotted cream and crushed walnuts. It's tart, lush, and feels like something you'd eat on a velvet divan while reading poetry aloud to no one in particular. And speaking of cream, kaimak. Oh dear, this isn't whipped cream or butter. This is water buffalo milk reduced until it becomes a rich, spreadable cloud. People have fought wars for less. You're handed a small dish of kaimak layered with honey and served with katmer, a flaky pastry folded into a rose. It's not just a bite, it's a moment. You sip a sherbet made from sour cherry juice and hibiscus, served chilled in a thin brass cup. Refreshing, slightly astringent, and utterly regal. A quick aside, one sultan had iced fruit sherbets imported from the mountains, delivered in snow-packed clay urns, just so he could sip chilled plum juice in the middle of summer. You respect that level of pettiness. In one quiet corner, you discover a strange little dessert, tavuk gosu again, the milk pudding with chicken. Only this version is rolled into kazan dibi form and sprinkled with powdered sugar and cinnamon. You try it again, just to be sure. And yes, it still doesn't make sense, but it still works. Historians still debate whether these desserts were created for pleasure or medicine. Ottoman medical texts often mention sugar, rosewater, and almond milk as digestive aids, sleep inducers, and even aphrodisiacs. The palace sweets, they weren't just indulgences, they were alchemy. There's even a rumor that one sultan had his dessert chefs make 100 dishes of halva, each flavored with a different flour. Only 2 were ever repeated, and one of those caused a temporary palace-wide obsession with violet sherbet. A fringe anecdote? Some believe that the famous sugar sculptures of the Topkapi banquets, towers shaped like birds, ships, even entire mosques, were edible messages. Each one symbolizing a political shift, a marriage, or a rising star in the court. You admire a tray of sugar-coated almonds arranged like pearls, and tiny fruit preserves, rachel, of rose petal, green fig, sour cherry, and walnut, stored in elegant crystal jars. Each spoonful tastes like a memory. And finally, you notice a large platter near the window. Simple, round cookies dusted with powdered sugar. No filling, no syrup. Just kurabiye, shortbread made with butter and flour. The cook shrugs. Sometimes sweet is just sweet. You lean against a tiled pillar, drowsy with syrup and stories. The room doesn't smell of sugar, it breathes it, like the marble itself has been glazed. Before you go, the pastry master hands you a small package, a slice of hoka tatlasi, a fried spiral of dough soaked in orange blossom syrup. Eat it tomorrow, he says. It's even better when the syrup settles. You nod, already knowing you won't wait. Because in the Tatla Odasa, time melts, like sugar.
Your footsteps are slower now, heavy even, not just from sugar, but from something deeper, a creeping sense of awe. You've seen meats that masquerade as pudding, and puddings laced with poultry. You've tasted stews fit for war horses and desserts fit for demigods. But now, the doors ahead open to a different place entirely. No steam, no noise, just a cool hush. You've entered the spice chamber, the aromatic heart of the Ottoman palace kitchen. It's darker here, deliberately so. Walls lined with wooden drawers, hundreds of them, each one labeled with curling calligraphy. Clove, nigella, mahlep, saffron, mastic, fenugreek, names that sound like spells. You breathe in and immediately regret trying to assign a single smell to this place. It's not one scent, it's 1,000 quiet arguments. Sweet, sharp, warm, bitter. There's cumin and cinnamon, yes, but also dry rose petals, crushed dried limes, cardamom pods so green they look wet, and dustings of sumac that sparkle with sourness. And of course, saffron, the true diva of the spice world, stored separately in silk-lined boxes, guarded, measured out by weight thinner than breath. A pinch too much is ruin, a pinch too little, and no one notices. You lift the lid and look inside. It glows like sunlight. Historians still argue whether saffron was hoarded by palace cooks as status symbols or whether it was genuinely essential to royal cuisine. Both might be true, because in the Ottoman kitchen, symbol and substance were never separate. You see a man grinding something in a stone mortar. You ask. He answers, Baharat Karashima, a spice blend, but he won't say which. Each chef had their own mixture, passed down like family secrets or cursed treasure maps. Clove, black pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, dried rose, maybe more, maybe less. He smiles cryptically. Even I forget what's in it sometimes. Spices weren't just for food here. They were medicine, currency, and power. Many were imports. Nutmeg from the Moluccas, cinnamon from Ceylon, black pepper from India, anise from Anatolia. The palace didn't just buy spices, it brokered deals for them, secured trade routes, built empires. And in the kitchen, every dish you've seen, every one, was laced, dotted, or dusted with something from this room. You move to a small side table where dried herbs and flowers are sorted in silk pouches. Sage, mint, bay leaf, thyme. There's sumac, deep red, tart, used in meat dishes and pickles. You sample a bit on your finger. It tastes like lemon and revenge. Nearby,
dried rose petals used to infuse syrups, teas, desserts, and sometimes stuffed into lamb dishes with apricots and cinnamon. Because in the palace, meat and flowers were not opposites. They were co-stars. One jar contains mahlep, a ground seed from wild cherry pits. It smells faintly of bitter almond and vanilla. You taste a speck. It's subtle, earthy, faintly haunting. It's used in sweets and breads, rarely but deliberately, like punctuation. You pass shelves with odd items, dried limes, blackened and hollow, used in rice dishes for a tangy, smoky punch. A box of asafoetida, known for its pungent smell, but surprisingly mellow flavor when cooked. An ancient ingredient, likely inherited from Persian culinary traditions. Historians still debate whether ingredients like asafoetida were used in Ottoman royal kitchens or reserved for physicians. Some claim its medicinal stench didn't pass the palace's olfactory standards. Others say it was used in lentil stews served to viziers who needed digestive clarity, which is quite a euphemism. You find a rack of spice-infused oils and vinegars: rose vinegar, garlic oil, saffron oil. These were used to glaze meats, drizzle on pilaf, and sometimes even as perfume. One bottle smells so inviting, you're not sure if it's for food or wrist pulses. A spice master offers you a taste of cinnamon bark boiled into tea. It's woody, warming, and somehow reminds you of cold marble and heated debates. For digestion, he says, and to soothe tempers. Given Ottoman court politics, he probably brewed gallons. You sit down at a small wooden bench. The master lays out a few handwritten ledgers, inventories of spice deliveries. Careful calligraphy lists quantities: 2 akka black pepper, 3 dirham saffron, 1 box frankincense. There's a margin note with a faded ink blot. Too much coriander last week, complaints from the janissaries. Even the soldiers had opinions. You flip through the pages and find sketches, tiny diagrams of where to layer spices in a stuffed roast. One note reads, "Rose first, then cinnamon, never reverse, makes the taste confused." A fringe anecdote? In 1574, during a diplomatic banquet, the Sultan reportedly received a stew spiced like a baker's closet, meaning too sweet. It sparked a kitchen reshuffle and the quiet exile of 2 chefs to a provincial outpost near Bursa. Their crime: improper cumin layering. Even the soldiers had opinions. You flip through the pages and find sketches, tiny diagrams of where to layer spices in a stuffed roast. One note reads, "Rose first, then cinnamon, never reverse, makes the taste confused." A fringe anecdote? In 1574, during a diplomatic banquet, the Sultan reportedly received a stew spiced like a baker's closet, meaning too sweet. It sparked a kitchen reshuffle and the quiet exile of 2 chefs to a provincial outpost near Bursa. Their crime: improper cumin layering. You move toward the back, where incense burners sit among the spices. That's right, spices didn't just season food, they scented rooms, clung to fabrics, wafted through palace halls. Some believe that the choice of incense signaled the mood of the court: rose and ambergris for peace, clove and musk for battle readiness. You reach for a final drawer. Inside, dried lavender buds. Used sparingly, but when needed, they infused syrups, flavored rice pudding, or soothed headaches. You crush a bud between your fingers. It smells like sleep. And then, just when you think you've seen it all, you notice a small side alcove, a cold chamber scented with pine. Inside, tightly wrapped bundles of musk, civet, ambergris, the rare animal-derived substances once used to scent oils, candies, and even select desserts. The logic: if it smells divine, maybe it tastes divine too. Historians still argue whether these ingredients were ever truly edible or just aspirational. Some texts hint at their use in royal halva, others think they were just sniffed. You step away quietly, leaving the bundles undisturbed. Some mysteries are better left untouched. Back in the main chamber, the Spice Master pours you a final cup of warm clove and orange tisane. He doesn't say much, just taps the cup once and walks away. You sip. It's strong, warm, strange, like drinking memory. And as the flavors settle, you realize something. Every dish you've tasted, from the simplest soup to the most delicate sherbet, was shaped in this room. Not cooked here, not prepared here, but defined here. Spices were the invisible architecture of Ottoman cuisine, not always noticed, but never absent.
You leave the spice chamber a little buzzed. Not from caffeine, not even sugar, just sensory overload, like your whole skull is steeped in clove and cinnamon. So it's oddly refreshing when your next stop is a place of precision. Welcome to the Palace Pantry, where dry goods reign and chaos is politely but firmly told to wait outside. The ceilings are high, the shelves taller, rows upon rows of jars, sacks, bins, and baskets, each perfectly labeled, precisely stacked. The scent here is faint, grains, starches, dried legumes. It smells like planning, like a spreadsheet, but edible. A steward with a clipboard, okay, a wooden slate, nods to you. Inventory's done at dawn. If you want barley, now's the time. You smile. He's not joking. Because this isn't just a storage room. This is logistical wizardry. The Ottoman Palace kitchen complex, known as the Matba-i Amira, fed over 4,000 people daily. On ceremonial days, closer to 10,000. You run your fingers over a giant sack labeled bulgur, cracked wheat, sun-dried and nutty, used in pilafs, stuffed grape leaves, and thick soups. Next to it, rice, the expensive kind, probably imported from Egypt or the eastern provinces. Not just any rice, this is long grain, pearlescent, and painstakingly washed multiple times before cooking. A row over, you see barley, used in soups for the palace guards. Rumor has it, janissaries could detect whether barley had been stored too long just by smell and would riot if it offended them. A quirky but credible claim, given how tightly palace food quality was tied to court morale. And then, the legumes. Oh, the legumes. Chickpeas sorted by size. Lentils, red, green, brown, each for different stews. Fava beans, used in purees or mashed and fried. They're not glamorous, but they're essential. You're told that the palace kitchen measured daily chickpea use in okas, and one time, a minister was demoted over a miscalculation. Historians still argue whether this was truly about legumes or just an excuse to reshuffle power. Either way, never underestimate the politics of beans. On a lower shelf, you find flour, multiple kinds. White wheat flour for bread and pastries, semolina for sweets, and whole wheat for sturdy, rustic flatbreads. The bins are sealed, dry, and tightly managed. Spoiled flour could ruin an entire week's production and cause embarrassment at a banquet. Further back, you discover dried fruits, apricots, raisins, figs, dates. They're sticky, plump, and fragrant, stored in shallow baskets lined with laurel leaves. They weren't just snacks, they were sweeteners, meat pairings, and luxury garnishes. One recipe from a 17th century feast calls for a roast quail stuffed with raisins, quince, and cloves. Tied shut? No. Delicious? You bet. You find jars of nuts, walnuts, pistachios, almonds, pine nuts, shelled, sorted, and sometimes lightly roasted. They're used across the board, in stews, pilafs, pastries, even savory sauces. One lesser-known trick? Ground almond thickener for sauces when flour would feel too heavy. A fringe tidbit. Some historians believe the Ottomans developed an early version of trail mix for military campaigns. Dried figs, almonds, and chickpeas roasted in honey. Easy to carry, high in energy, and possibly the world's first road snack. On a smaller table, stacks of flatbreads wrapped in cloth. Lavash, yufka, baslama. These weren't baked in the palace kitchens directly, but brought in daily from satellite bakeries. There was a whole bread manager, a ekmekçi bashi, responsible for reviewing quality and coordinating delivery. One legend says that a batch of over-salted bread led to a full kitchen audit and the mysterious disappearance of a yeast vendor. Again, probably exaggerated, but not impossible. At a stone counter, a chef is mixing a dough for muchver, a kind of zucchini fritter bound with flour and eggs, flavored with mint and dill. You watch him shape the mixture into rough patties and drop them into hot oil. The scent is instant. Savory, herby, comfort incarnate. He lets you taste one. It's perfect. Crisp edges, soft middle, a gentle tang from the herbs. You ask how he gets them so fluffy. He gestures at a large ceramic bowl. Dried yogurt powder, rehydrated and folded into the batter. Another pantry trick. You wander over to a stack of ceramic jars. Inside, molasses, grape, mulberry, even carob, used to sweeten dishes before refined sugar became widespread. There's also tamarind paste, used for its tang and digestive qualities. Some believe it helped balance the heavy lamb and legume dishes so common in winter. Historians still argue whether sugar or fruit molasses was preferred by different sultans. Some favored the richer depth of molasses, others demanded snow-white sugar from Venice or Cyprus. Court records show bills for 2 chests of white crystal sugar billed at the price of silk. You sit on a low wooden stool, watching the pantry clerks measure out ingredients for the next morning's pilaf. It's almost military in its precision. Every scoop accounted for, every grain recorded. A quirky note, some pantry records from the 1600s were kept in poetic verse, part bookkeeping, part performance. One reads, "A pinch of salt, a fist of rice, may the Sultan's stew be twice as nice." Because even logistics, here, could flirt with art. On your way out, someone hands you a pouch. Inside, a mix of dried apricot, walnut, and sesame. For your walk, they say, and for your dreams. You chew slowly. It's chewy, crunchy, and faintly sweet. Feels like a secret. And suddenly you realize the palace pantry wasn't just about what was stored. It was about why. Behind every jar, every sack, every sealed container, there was intention. Meals weren't assembled, they were composed, like symphonies in cumin and chickpeas. And this room, this was the score. You step into the next space and immediately notice how the air changes, warmer, heavier. There's a scent here that feels less like food and more like ceremony. You've arrived in the heart of decadence, where utility meets theater. Welcome to the Sweets and Sherbet Wing, a palace within the palace. If the Matba Amire was a machine of culinary mastery, then this room is its jeweled crown, a place where sugar is not just a sweetener, but an ideology. You hear it before you see it, the gentle bubbling of syrup, the sizzle of semolina browning in butter, the occasional sharp hiss of a copper pot touched too soon. And then, oh, you smell it. Rose water, orange blossom, toasted nuts, melted sugar flirting with the edge of caramel. You pass a tall, wide table piled high with lakma, tiny, deep-fried dough balls soaked in honey syrup.
crunchy on the outside, gooey in the middle, and somehow still steaming hot. A kitchen boy hands you one. "Be careful," he whispers, smiling. "These burn fast and cool slow." You bite. It's like eating lightning wrapped in silk. Further along, you reach a row of marble counters where chefs in pristine robes, yes, actual white silk robes, are stretching a long coil of dough into paper-thin layers. You've seen baklava before, but not like this. The dough is so thin you could read poetry through it. Each tray is meticulously layered: pastry, melted butter, crushed pistachio. Repeat, repeat. Then bake until golden and soak, lightly, never drowned, in a syrup scented with rose or lemon. Historians still argue whether the best baklava was made in the palace or brought in from Damascus. What we know, palace baklava was sent as gifts to military leaders during the annual baklava procession, a grand ceremony complete with music, marching janissaries, and towering trays of pastry like edible trophies. In the far corner, you notice an enormous copper vat. Inside, a chef stirs what looks like thick beige lava. He invites you closer. "Helva," he says, "but royal style." This isn't the crumbly sesame kind you may know. This is helvasi, a hot semolina dessert made with flour, butter, sugar, and pine nuts, stirred constantly, patiently, lovingly, for hours. It's served warm, almost like a thick pudding, usually flavored with cloves or cinnamon. He hands you one. It tastes like childhood and slow mornings. Nearby, a smaller pan bubbles with goulash, the ancestor of modern baklava. Delicate layers of starch paper soaked in milk and rose water, filled with nuts, chilled, and garnished with pomegranate seeds. A favorite during Ramadan for its cooling, gentle sweetness. And oh, the candied fruits, trays of them. Orange peel, quince, even whole baby eggplants. Peeled, soaked in lime water to firm up, boiled in sugar syrup until glassy and translucent. You pop a piece of candied quince in your mouth and it shatters like stained glass.
Then, over in the alcove that gleams with polished copper and crystal, you discover the sherbet station. Not the creamy frozen kind you're thinking of. Ottoman sherbet was liquid luxury, cold, floral, tart-sweet drinks made by steeping fruits, herbs, and spices in sugar syrup and chilling with snow or ice. That's right, snow collected from mountains and stored in underground chambers. You try one flavored with sour cherry and basil, another with violet and lemon, and a final glass of tamarind, clove, and rose. It punches your mouth like a polite handshake that turns into a hug. There's a legend that one sultan, after being served an especially bitter sherbet, declared war on the province that exported its lemons. Probably untrue, but totally believable. A fringe fact: some sherbets were used medicinally. Rose for calming, tamarind for digestion, mint for headaches. Historians still debate whether sherbets were more pharmaceutical or festive in purpose. The answer, most likely, both. Now you find a chef hand-pulling makoun, a kind of sticky herbal paste somewhere between candy and tonic. It's glossy, vibrant, and spicy sweet. He twirls it onto a stick in multicolored ribbons. You taste it. It tingles. A little licorice, a little mint, a little mystery. Makoun was believed to balance humors, spark appetite, and yes, even cure heartbreak. Poets wrote about it. Apothecaries guarded the recipes like state secrets. In the background, a younger apprentice prepares palace puddings: sutlach, rice pudding, kazandibi, caramelized milk pudding, and tavuk gusu. Ah yes, that one. You hesitate. The apprentice nods. Yes, chicken breast pudding. Real chicken breast, pounded to fibers,
cooked with milk, sugar, and rice flour until indistinguishable. A textural marvel, not a meaty dessert. You try it, and it's oddly soothing, like if rice pudding went to finishing school. Historians still argue if it was actually enjoyable or just fashionable, like 17th century edible Instagram. Either way, it became iconic. You sit for a moment in a cushioned alcove, surrounded by silver trays of sweets, each one more intricate than the last. Pastries shaped like roses, cookies stamped with imperial seals, tiny jeweled confections made of marzipan and crushed pistachio. It's overwhelming, yes, but here's the truth. These weren't just desserts. They were declarations, to guests, to rivals, to time itself. Look what we can do with flour and fire and patience, they seemed to say. Look how beautiful the end of a meal can be. And that's when you see it, a small dish, almost hidden. Just a single dry date, split and filled with a crushed almond and a dusting of cinnamon. No syrup, no gold leaf, no fanfare. Just elegance, stripped bare. And somehow, that little date tastes more royal than all the sherbet in the palace. You rise slowly, your hands sticky with sugar, your heart oddly full. Because if there's a single truth here, it's this. In the Ottoman palace kitchen, sweetness was never simple. It was layered, labored, loved, and above all, designed to linger.
The last room you enter isn't grand. There are no gold-dusted pastries here, no master chefs flinging syrup or shouting across marble counters. Just a warm breeze, the creak of old wood, and the sound of nothing, really. You're in the palace garden kitchen, a space tucked between courtyards, open to the air, and surrounded by herbs climbing every available surface. This is where the quiet work happens, where the ingredients aren't just prepared, but grown, foraged, tended, and understood. Here, the chefs speak in hushed tones and move without ceremony. They're not interested in impressing you. They're focused on making food that means something. You pass a row of clay pots sprouting fresh mint, parsley, dill, tarragon, thyme, sorrel. Their scents rise with the warmth, cool, green, faintly peppery. You stop at a low bench where a woman slices a pile of fresh purslane, a crisp, lemony green that grows wild, loved for its tang and bite. She's mixing it with yogurt and garlic, making a simple dish known as semizotu kachia. It's light, cold, and hits like the culinary version of taking your shoes off after a long day. Next to her, someone peels green almonds, still tender and fuzzy from the tree. These are dipped in salt and eaten as spring snacks, treasured for their delicate crunch. They taste like anticipation. And over by a shallow basin, someone gently rinses wild sorrel leaves to be sautéed with olive oil and a little pomegranate molasses. A passing chef hands you a small plate. On it, a slice of roasted eggplant topped with a tomato onion parsley salad, chilled. It's imam bayilda, which literally means the imam fainted. You ask why? The chef smiles. Because it was so good, or maybe so rich in oil he slipped. Historians still argue. Some say the dish is a nod to fasting, a meal served at sundown during Ramadan. Others believe it was designed to show off olive oil shipments from the Aegean. Either way, it's been passed down so many generations, it barely needs a recipe. Nearby, two young cooks crush sumac berries with a pestle, extracting their tart, citrusy zing. One tosses the powder onto a cucumber salad, the other into a pot of lentil soup. Both taste completely different, but both sparkle. And suddenly it clicks. Ottoman food wasn't just layers and spice and opulence. It was also balance, memory, softness. You sit under a fig tree. Yes, a real one. Its leaves throw dappled shade across the garden stones. A fig drops beside you, nearly ripe. You pick it up, split it open. It's red and glistening inside. You remember that fig was often used as both food and metaphor, for plenty, for sensuality, for life. One chef tells you about the bozacha, the man who sold boza, a fermented millet drink, door to door. He'd call out in song at night, and people would come with clay cups to fill. Thick, tangy, and low in alcohol, it was both street food and probiotic health tonic long before anyone knew what gut flora was. You sip a chilled boza now. It tastes faintly like sourdough, or maybe nostalgia. A quirky note, some palace boza was thick enough to support a spoon upright. If it tilted, back to the pot. Across the garden, someone is stuffing zucchini blossoms with rice and herbs, tying them shut with chive stems. These delicate packages are steamed gently, then chilled and eaten in one perfect bite. Their flavor is like the last day of spring, floral, fleeting, slightly sad. And here where we end, not with fireworks or parades, but a single bowl placed in front of you.
It's a dish of mercimek çorbası, red lentil soup, pureed, seasoned with a little cumin, and finished with a drizzle of lemon and mint butter. It's humble, nourishing, the kind of food made for soldiers, servants, and sultans alike. This bowl has been served in one form or another for centuries. And right now, sitting here in the garden, warm stone at your back, mint in the air, a fig leaf brushing your hair, it feels like the truest taste of the Ottoman kitchen. Because in the end, that's what this whole journey was about. Not just forgotten recipes or royal extravagance or silver platters heavy with lamb, but the way food quietly remembers, the way it carries stories, whispers, rituals, leaves trails. So even if no sultan ever writes your name into the kitchen logbook, you'll know. Tonight, you walked through fire, syrup, smoke, steam, and herb-scented wind, and you tasted history, bite by bite. You're still sitting in the garden. The lentil soup is long gone, but its warmth stays with you. A soft, gentle fullness, not just in your stomach, but in your chest. The breeze has cooled now. The scent of mint fades into the background, blending with the faint rustle of fig leaves and the low hum of the night. A cat walks by, unbothered, tail high. Maybe it's always lived here. Maybe it watched sultans pass. Maybe it knows the best secrets of the kitchen and just won't tell. You stretch your legs. The stone under you is warm from the day, cool at the edges. Somewhere nearby, someone is stirring something, slowly, methodically. Maybe pudding, maybe porridge, maybe nothing at all. And now, even that sound fades. The garden softens. The leaves shimmer one last time before going still. The smells, rose, mint, spice, become memories. The air feels like exhale. You don't need to move. You don't need to think. Just let the richness of everything you've seen, smelled, and tasted settle like flour at the bottom of a jar. This is the moment between courses, between stories, between waking and sleep. So let yourself ease into it, slowly. Let the last golden thread of honey melt on your tongue. Let your shoulders drop, your breath slow. Let the old stone of the kitchen cradle you, as it has cradled so many before. And let the palace fade, not gone, just quieter now, waiting for the next dreamer to step through the steam. Good night.